John Calvin. I think most of you know him. He was a great one for talking about the struggles that we have as Christians and the difference between living with peace and rest and being restful, resting in God, and having this restlessness that comes from the struggle between what we believe or what God wants us to do and what we believe we want to do. And we are not always in line with what God wants. And there is this struggle, and he calls it a snare. And one of his writings says, delivering our minds from every snare. Nothing is more difficult than to forsake all carnal thoughts, to subdue and renounce our false appetites, and to devote ourselves to God and our brethren, and to live a life of angels in a world of corruption. He says that really well. I never thought of myself as living as an angel in a world of corruption. What about you? I think I sometimes think of myself far from being an angel. I would like to be an angel of God, but sometimes I live more in the world of corruption than I care to admit. He goes on to say, to deliver our minds from every snare, Paul calls attention to the hope of a blessed immorality and encourages us that our hope is not in vain. As Christ once appeared as a redeemer, so will he at his second coming show us the benefits of the salvation which he obtained. Christ dispels the charms which blind us and prevent us from longing with the right zeal for the glory of heaven. Christ also teaches us that we must live as strangers and pilgrims in this world, that we may not lose our heavenly inheritance. Do you consider yourself a stranger in this world, just trying to do what God's will is? Or do you think that you're at home with the corruption of the world? It can be kind of a scary thought to think about, can't it? So if Calvin is saying that those who surrender completely to God's will have a peace that passes all understanding, then that means those that have not surrendered completely to his will are restless people, according to Calvin. So, have you experienced the peace that passes all understanding? And what does that feel like? And have you experienced at times in your life the restlessness that comes from being far from God and living in the corrupt world? And what does that feel like? Maybe your testimony this week to another person. So stand by. Here's the challenge I promised. Maybe you can give a testimony of the peace that passes all understanding. And if that one's hard to come by, maybe you give a testimony of a time where you lived in that restlessness because you were so far from God, and how God brought you back together with him. Okay, which one will you choose? Or maybe you have both. Sometimes we have the peace of God. Sometimes we are living like angels sent from God in the living in the corrupt world, but being angels of God. Sometimes we are more living in the corrupt world and liking it far more than we should. What testimony do you have this week? And pass it on to another. That's your challenge. See you next week.